Welcome in, everyone, and thank you for listening to the 88th ever episode of the Missouri Sports Podcast, brought to you by 106 Apparel and recording once again from the Revel Advertising Studio. The Revel Advertising Studio is back, folks, in beautiful Springfield, Missouri. I'm one of your hosts, Cameron Albert, alongside my good friend and fellow Mizzou fan, Kyle DeVries. How are you doing today, Kyle?
I'm doing great. Springfield Mo, the home of Brad Pitt and Anton, Brookshire.
Yes.
That's where we're recording from.
Yes.
I am great. It feels good to be back in the studio. I drove here. I drove my car. I traversed the streets in the city. That was an experience.
Yeah, I haven't done that in a while.
I know.
Yeah. It definitely does feel good to see you guys' beautiful faces in person.
In the flesh.
And be back here in this lovely studio. It's weird having all this hardware and stuff and having to remember to bring a memory card and stuff like that because...
Seems like more work.
Yeah. On the way over here, I was like, oh, is this... Honestly, I feel like...
Still getting used to it.
Stuff like that. I feel like a lot of workplaces are going to, after this experience, they're going to be like, why are we paying for an office space when we just worked remotely out of necessity and everything worked just fine?
I 100% had one of those moments actually on a Zoom call yesterday with my boss and some of my coworkers where, we're kind of starting to figure out how to function as a team virtually. And, I think it's very possible that even, through the summer and fall, we still may not be working 5 days a week in the office, and because we just don't necessarily need to. So I think things will change.
Any companies that are able to just cut that out of their overhead expenses, then it's just like a no-brainer.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Help the bottom line. Anyway, this podcast we talk about Mizzou football and basketball and
finances.
Yeah, company structures, among
strategies.
Other things. Yes. This week we are going to talk about Anton Brookshire committing to Missouri. The Bass Pro Tournament of Champions teams for 2021 have been announced. We're going to talk about how KU is in big trouble. We're going to give out our Mizzou basketball all-decade team and play a little game where we have $15 to make the best Mizzou basketball lineup possible. So first, let's talk about Anton Brookshire. He was offered by Mizzou. That made news on Tuesday, and then 2 days later, he has committed to the Tigers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we watched Anton Brookshire in the Tournament of Champions last January.
Plays for Kickapoo.
I am a Kickapoo alum. So it was cool to see them in the tournament. They've had a lot of success in the tournament in the past. But it was cool to see them go up against Oak Hill and some great programs like that. Anton played very well. He was a junior, obviously. He scored 33 points against Oak Hill. He made, I think he was 7 of 12 from 3. He looked like he was very much enjoying the moment. Did not back down to the competition whatsoever. So, I've seen him play fairly limited, but, we've seen him play 3 times. I would say he was pretty consistent in his performance all 3 times. He's a great shooter. He's a tough guard for sure. So
yeah,
a lot of potential to look forward to for sure.
Yeah, he didn't obviously he didn't go 7 for 12 from 3 in all 3 games in the tournament, but yeah, he was still really impressive. We would have had another chance to see him if the state tournament hadn't been canceled due to the coronavirus, but his team was set to face off against Caleb Love and CBC in the state semifinals. So that would have been another really good matchup to go see. But in total, last year as a junior, he averaged 20.5 points, 4 rebounds, and 3.5 assists. He was definitely the main scoring threat for their team. So even though he initiated the offense, it usually still ended up with him shooting the ball. So not surprising that he didn't have a ton of assists. I still think, at the collegiate level, if the shooting translates, then he'll get plenty of opportunities to score. And it seemed like from what I've read and stuff, he's really been working on expanding his mid-range game as well as just getting to the basket and finishing creatively because he's a little bit undersized. He's still listed at 6 foot. I think when he's playing basketball his senior year, this upcoming season, He will not be listed at 6 foot anymore, and he could even be taller than that by the time he gets to Mizzou. But I think the sort of like standard point guard role will come naturally to him, and he'll be able to make the plays, find the open man, just like any other point guard, just like your average point guard does, I guess. But if he's able to shoot and score the way he does in high school, and that translates, maybe not his freshman year, sophomore year, but if he seems like a 4-year guy that's really going to develop and eventually be a really potent part of the offense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely the the rumors and the whispers definitely at the Tournament of Champions back in January was that he was getting a lot of high major interest after, his performance against Oak Hill. Definitely caught the attention of some bigger schools. We knew that Mizzou has definitely been interested for a while. I didn't know if he would get that offer, and I don't really know what changed in the last, week or so that they decided to pull the trigger. But I definitely think that, with a lot of departures, 21 class definitely has some room. And I think a guy like this, an in-state guy who can shoot, I definitely think this is a kind of guy you want to take a chance on. And, I think it's probably even he's a better player than just taking a chance on him. I definitely think that this is a solid get that Missouri should be proud of.
Yeah, looking back at our Tournament of Champions recap episode, we talked about him as being like a guy that could potentially really blow up his senior season. And I actually thought we'd see a little bump in the recruiting rankings for him coming right off the back of the tournament. We didn't really see that when the 2021 class has been updated a couple times since then. So I don't know, maybe this offer and commitment, if this was a KU offer and commitment, then he'd be like top 50 in the nation tomorrow. But
yeah,
Mizzou offer doesn't get treated quite the same way, but
still gets him some exposure. And Jeff Goodman from ESPN had some really nice things to say about him as well. So he's definitely on the radar for national analysts, and I definitely think that this commitment will give him some more exposure. But it's funny you said that too, because the coach from Christ the King in New York, he said in an interview after the game that this is probably the best point guard we've gone against all year, and they've gone against some great programs. And he said if Anton Brookshire was playing in New York, he probably would have blown up by now. So there was a lot of great things that was said about him, and I think he's definitely undervalued as a recruit right now. So
yeah, and I think the commitment will bring some attention his way, and when his senior season starts, and as trivial as it sounds, when he's listed at 6'2" on the program and that goes into the databases, then that'll boost his ranking a bit. So yeah, I think when we talked about it around the Tournament of Champions time about Mizzou maybe getting in on his recruitment, he was still seen as sort of a mid-major type recruit or caliber recruit, and would have been like a tremendous get still for like a Missouri State. And but watching his performance in the tournament, it was like, okay, if Mizzou's interested, they just need to go all in and go ahead and get him just for the upside.
Mm-hmm.
Good news surrounding Anton Brookshire and his Kickapoo Chiefs are that they are going to be back, folks, in the Tournament of Champions again in 2021, which is really cool. So we'll get to see him again. And for the first time, we will have a Mizzou commit at the Tournament of Champions for sure this time. We missed out on Trey Jackson because he wasn't actually there, and we were confused about the roster for Sunrise Christian. We were off a year on Vashon being there with Mario McKinney. E.J. Liddell did not choose Mizzou when he was at the Tournament of Champions. Cam Fletcher was there but went to Kentucky. So we've had so many near misses of having a Mizzou commit at the Tournament of Champions where we can talk to him. And finally, we're going to get to do that with Anton Brookshire, although he'll be sort of the belle of the ball, being the hometown kid and getting the Mizzou offer and being very familiar with all the media folks, but we'll still do our best to get in there and talk to him.
Mm-hmm.
Other teams that have been announced for the Tournament of Champions are Bishop Gorman DeSmet from St. Louis, Greenwood again from Springfield featuring Aminu Muhammad, IMG Academy from Florida, Kickapoo, like we said, Pace Academy, Roman Catholic, and once again Sunrise Christian from Bel Air, Kansas.
Mm-hmm. So there will be some other Mizzou targets that will be playing in the tournament next January as well. Tamar Bates is transferring to IMG Academy, so we'll get to see him. He's got some offers though from some other big programs, so I don't know if Mizzou will still be in the running. That obviously January is a long time from now, but and then obviously I think I'm saying this right. Yaya Kita plays for De Smet, and so I believe he has a Mizzou offer as well. So
yeah, I was trying to figure out if he for sure has a Mizzou offer, and I couldn't quite determine. They've been in contact for sure and are recruiting him, but I don't know that an official offer has been made yet.
Gotcha.
And then De Smet has another big guy that I can't remember his name, another sort of like post player that's maybe a 2022 recruit. He may be 2021 that also has offers from I think maybe one Power 5 school, either Kansas State or Iowa or somebody like that. So definitely some guys to keep an eye on. IMG is going to be stacked with juniors next year. So several 2022 guys. It'll be interesting to see how Tamar Bates fits into the rotation there, because, I mean, they have like some top 20 in their class will be juniors. And obviously he'll be a senior next year. So I consider them definitely the early favorite, but a lot can change, especially with some of these prep academies, prep schools. They get transfers in and out, so the rosters might be a little bit different by the time the tournament actually gets here. But we will be applying for credentials once again, and hopefully be there to take it all in, and you can follow along with us. Let's see here.
Speaking of JQH Arena, did you see that it was reported that Mizzou is supposed to go to Springfield
yeah, that's newsworthy.
next season?
Yeah.
I've heard some like different reports on that. I still don't know if that's going to be official. I'm assuming it is, but
it's being reported on as if it's official, even though I don't think the university has officially told the public.
Yeah. So that should be interesting. Obviously someone who's lived in Springfield my whole life. I'm probably one of the few people that kind of root for both programs. Obviously, I'm a huge Mizzou fan. I root for Missouri State. I go to their games fairly regularly. That's going to be an interesting experience. That's something that I've always wanted to see, is these two teams play against each other. And it'll be weird to see it happen first in Springfield at JQH Arena. So that is definitely a game that we will be attending if it's happening. It's a homecoming for Konzo. From a Mizzou standpoint, I'm not sure it makes a ton of sense. But as a purely entertainment standpoint, from my perspective, I'm really happy that it's happening.
I completely agree. And while I don't completely echo the sentiment of somebody that's really against this happening, I can see that perspective to some extent. I mean, like you said, it doesn't necessarily make the most sense for Mizzou. But you can almost say that about any... I guess like Mizzou going on the road to any mid-major school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you pretty much could.
I mean, the downside of losing vastly outweighs the upside of winning.
Right.
And I still, like, take Anton Brookshire, for example. If this recruitment was taking place a month after Missouri State upset Mizzou at JQH Arena, I don't think I don't think that would be enough to make him choose Missouri State over Mizzou. I still think if there's recruits that are being looked at by both, first of all, Mizzou's going to be recruiting against other programs like we've seen in recent history, like K-State, Iowa State, Kansas to some extent, and then bigger schools, obviously, and like Illinois right across the border. So Mizzou's still going to be competing with those schools. Those schools generally aren't competing with Missouri State for recruits, so there's just not that much overlap there.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not something I'm too concerned about. And honestly, as a Mizzou fan, if Mizzou's competing with Missouri State for a recruit, I want Mizzou to get them 10 out of 10 times. So, and obviously I'll be at the game, and while I definitely root for the Bears during their season, I'll be rooting for Mizzou in this game.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. It's not like I'm a big Missouri State fan over Mizzou and think this is just such a great thing for Missouri State. I don't know. I think it's cool to see those in-state rivalries.
Yeah, I think it's just good.
And it's not a rivalry, but it's,
Yeah.
develop something there. Get the Springfield folks that are Mizzou fans maybe more engaged with the program.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. That's what it does for me anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that'll be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it. News also came out that in that same video call that Mizzou will apparently be playing Wichita State next year. Wichita State was pretty good program this past season, but they've kind of had a mass exodus of transfers, so it's kind of hard to predict what they're going to look like next year.
Yeah, there's some roster churn for sure in Wichita.
I think they had like 6 or 7 guys. I think maybe had one guy that ended up staying, but they probably 5 or 6 for sure that
And then
are
I think
gone.
they snagged one of the top transfers that was available as well. So they had some pretty high caliber players coming in and out of there this offseason. That's an interesting dynamic there because Wichita State coach Greg Marshall is a guy that people have been clamoring for to be the Mizzou head coach for, probably ever since he first went to the NCAA tournament with Wichita State. So if Missouri goes out and gets blown out by Wichita State, then I don't know. We'll just be hearing more of that.
I would say probably you're right, but I would say probably half of the Power 5 teams in America
Absolutely.
have been in those very same shoes.
Yeah.
And it's crazy that he's just stayed at Wichita State.
Well,
And they've
they've got the money.
They've got the Koch brothers.
Yeah,
that
exactly.
are backing that program. So, so it's going to be a very interesting non-conference season. And I don't know if, we're scheduling some of these regional teams just for, travel stuff with COVID-19 or whatever. I don't know. But I have, from an entertainment standpoint, am really looking forward to this non-conference season. And, I think that that sometimes the narrative is that non-conference games don't matter, but I would definitely disagree with that. And I think that kind of like the demonstration that we did on Bart Torvik, a month ago or so.
Oh, right.
Definitely shows that non-conference games absolutely factor into your perception at the end of the year. And for bragging rights too, just you don't get to play Wichita State very often or whoever it is, so you definitely want to win those games.
Yeah, looking at the non-conference schedule as a whole, where it stands right now, I'm honestly a little bit scared.
I am a little bit scared too. I mean, we could just lose like all of them.
Yeah, I could see.
Then it won't be so fun.
Yeah, I could definitely see a scenario where Missouri comes out of non-conference with like 5 wins, and that would be.
I definitely thought
terrifying.
that that non-conference tournament that they played this past season they played Butler in Oklahoma. I was definitely thought that was going to be really fun, and it wasn't. So
No, that was not fun at all. Yeah, there was another non-conference game in there that was also not fun that we featured in that Bart Torvik analysis. So hopefully we don't get a repeat of anything close to that.
Mm-hmm.
Because we saw how detrimental that would be. Let's see. Any other big news? I know we are going to talk about Kansas getting in trouble, but anything else? I completely forgot about that Missouri State matchup getting announced.
I think that's it.
So for some reason, there's still not, I mean, unless you go read the report, and who are we kidding? I'm not going to go read the report. The details surrounding this KU situation are kind of hard to parse through. But the Kansas City Star had a really good article, and I'll just read you a couple lines from that are pretty damning for KU. Let's see here. The NCAA stated that the 5 Level 1 violations alleged against KU men's basketball program and Coach Bill Self are, quote, egregious, severe, and are the kind that significantly undermine and threaten the NCAA collegiate model. And another bit in this Kansas City Star article.
Like the sound of that so far.
Oh, yeah.
And that.
That's an ad. Well, react to that, and I'll try to find the next part that I was going to say.
I mean, like I said, it sounds pretty juicy, I got to say, as a Missouri fan. At the same time, it's always like, well, is anything really going to happen here? I don't know, what's going to happen, but it would be really nice to not see Kansas in the NCAA tournament next year. I don't know if that will be kind of a postseason thing, if they get slapped with a postseason ban or not, but that'd be nice.
So the way I see it happening is it's just the way my brain works. I see Missouri finally beating Kansas at something since we haven't played them in a while, and then Kansas fans saying, well, they weren't really into it because, it's a lost season. They're not playing for anything because they already know they can't go to the NCAA tournament.
They'll probably just have some games like, what do they call it, when they just basically say these wins didn't exist.
Oh, yeah, but they'll be vacated.
Yeah, those vacate a bunch of wins, and that'll be all the things they get.
Yeah. Let's see here. KU released a statement that said, in part, quote, that said the NCAA's allegations were, quote, simply baseless and littered with false representations. The NCAA said, Kansas City Star said that the NCAA's response did nothing to de-escalate what is set to be a landmark infractions case in the upcoming months.
Didn't they kind of claim like some of the allegations for football were correct, but they kind of just denied everything about basketball?
That's what I was reading on Twitter. Gabe DeArmond said basically that the way he understood it was KU was acknowledging the infractions against the football team, but denying everything related to the basketball team.
I wonder which program they care about.
Yeah. Well, we know, based on Mizzou's recent history with the NCAA, that the better alternative is to deny if you think you have a case or just care enough to not get the book thrown at you. You should just deny and basically make them do the work and don't do any of the work for them. Don't come forward with anything. So it looks like that's what KU is trying to do, but maybe they're giving like an olive branch as the football violations. But do you think, I feel like the NCAA knows where they need to set precedent, and it's not with KU football.
Yeah. The KU football was not what brought attention to them in the first place, right. I'm sure. So.
Yeah, Les Miles wasn't wearing an Adidas shirt and hanging out with Snoop Dogg and firing fake money into the air. I don't know. That whole thing now, it's just going to be such a funny thing to think about if they
was when it happened, but it's even funnier now.
If they do face the severe repercussions that the NCAA is talking about, then like
they're going to get memed so hard.
Yeah, and it's not like the people involved, it won't be funny anymore. Maybe Bill Self will think it's funny when he goes
to the Spurs.
Yeah, and goes and starts coaching in the NBA, but I don't know.
Yeah, there's definitely, I don't know. We still don't really know anything yet, but that statement definitely was pretty juicy for sure. So
yeah, and it's just more relevant, I guess, in timing since Mizzou is going to play at Kansas next year, and that honestly is a kind of a weird thing that's going to be a real game that happens this coming basketball season.
I can't wait.
And I don't think we've talked since they announced that the football rivalry is returning as well.
Officially.
Yeah, we kind of knew that was being worked on for a long time, but they actually put dates on it. So I don't even remember when that's going to start.
26 or something.
Yeah.
It was like the first 25 maybe.
But I was disappointed. I think we did talk about, or maybe this was off air, that I would have liked to see the rivalry be late in the season, kind of like how Georgia Tech, Florida State, they have that late in the season non-conference game. We're not going to get that, but I'll take a win.
Yeah, so far in the future, I'm assuming Kansas will still be bad at football.
Well, that's what the Kansas fans were saying. Hey, that gives us enough time to at least be competitive.
Unless they get hit with allegations because they put it all on their football team.
That's true. Yeah, the football team is not getting out of anything because they kind of admitted to whatever the NCAA said on that one. All right. Any other news? Any other programs that we want to talk about?
That's it.
All right. So, obviously, it's now 2020, and it's not the 20 teens anymore. So we've had a really interesting last 10 seasons of Mizzou basketball.
I thought you were going to say a really interesting start to 2020.
Well, that's true, too. A lot of ups and downs in the last decade of Mizzou basketball. And so plenty of outlets did their Mizzou basketball all-decade team and Mizzou football all-decade teams during the seasons this past year. So we had too many games to talk about at that point to really dive deep into it. And this past basketball season did count as far as I'm concerned as, being a part of the decade that we were sort of analyzing. So now that it's all over, we thought we would sit down and figure out the podcast's all-decade team. So we're going to hash it out a little bit, maybe make cases for and against guys. And the way we're doing this is starting 5 and 3 bench players. And if it's okay with you, Kyle, I want to make the most competitive squad possible. So maybe we'll play around with positions a little bit, just basically the team that we think would make the best run towards a Final Four. Does that sound good?
That sounds great.
I guess, are there any I feel like there's just some no-brainers that we can pencil into the starting 5.
Yeah, pretty much the 2012 squad. You can pretty much pencil in all 5 of those starters, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, it does get a little bit interesting because Lawrence Bowers wasn't actually a starter.
That's true. I think Matt Pressey was a starter, so pretty much swap Matt Pressey for Lawrence Bowers.
Yeah. So that would be Phil at the 1, Marcus Denman at the 2. So the 2012 team mostly played English at the 4, but we're going to slide him back to his more natural 3 spot. Bowers at the 4 and Ratliff at the 5.
Yeah, I kind of feel like those guys are pretty non-negotiable.
Yeah, I would agree for the most part. It's so interesting that, I don't know, that's the all-decade starting 5, and they all played on the same team at some point. And that big what-if of Bowers, getting hurt and missing that whole season where they won the Big 12 tournament and were the 2 seed, and the NCAA tournament was canceled. But that big what-if of Bowers being available to them, I don't know, that's one of the biggest what-ifs in Mizzou basketball.
Yeah, that one will keep me up at night, I'm not going to lie. Bowers was probably one of my favorite Mizzou basketball players ever. He really wasn't the same player when he came back either. I mean, he was still a good player.
Still effective, but just different.
Just completely different in a different way, for sure. But I really kind of missed his super athletic, bouncy self that he was before his injury. But
he still had a ton of dunks when he actually got to his senior year.
Yeah.
They were just not as
They looked more like old man looking, but they were still he still had some good dunks, but he really improved his shot in the year that he was out. Yeah. So, yeah.
He was money from mid-range his senior year. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it just been really interesting to see what another big body would have done in allowing English to be at his natural 3 spot.
It's true. And, Bowers and Ratliff being kind of different players might have been an interesting dynamic, too, down low.
Because Ratliff basically just stayed right under the basket and just finished everything.
That's literally pretty much all he did. Yeah, he was just so efficient.
But if Bowers doesn't have that year off, he's not the same player from the mid-range. So maybe it doesn't work as well. And having the floor spacers that this team did in 2012, I think partially is what allowed Ratliff to have such a successful season.
Yeah, that was actually a thought that crossed my mind is Kim English as effective at the 3 as he was at the 4, because he was just so almost unguardable the way he could stretch the floor from a post position or a forward position.
Yeah, and he did enough. He did enough on defense guarding 4s that I think more often than not teams had to adjust to Mizzou's smaller lineup rather than just trying to impose their will. And basically the only teams that could do that were Kansas State and Kansas that year.
Yeah, it was just almost that Mizzou offered something so different that it just made them so hard to game plan against. And it's really not that any of those 5 players were just ultra talented, but they just gelled so well as a team and were able to just provide so much versatility individually in their roles. But I still feel like, especially with the way the rest of the decade ended up happening, I still feel like those 5 guys have to be there, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree. And we did get to see those 5 on the floor together. the year before. They just weren't quite as seasoned, and they were still playing the fastest 40 minutes and that sort of thing. And I think it is a testament to Frank Haith. Obviously, he was handed some really good players. He did have to deal with the Bowers injury and having a short bench, and
they played like 7 players every game.
And he was able to. I still think he got more out of that squad, and then maybe some of that is, Kim English reconciled by winning. They had something to prove that season, that basically Mike Anderson left something amazing on the table when he left for Arkansas. And so with that chip on their shoulder, and I still think that Haith was able to utilize the players he had to the best of their ability.
Right.
I mean, he got the very most out of each one of these guys.
For sure.
So I think it'll be a little bit more interesting to figure out what 3 bench players we want to go with. I almost think you still have to stick with that same squad and make your 6th man Mike Dixon.
Are we doing it by like position? Like, are we just doing the 3 most talented or best players?
Yeah, I think the 3 bench players that would fit in with this starting 5 to make them the most successful. And I think Dixon does that. I mean, we saw when he was no longer with the program, Phil Pressey was not the same player in the last 4 minutes of games that he was the first 16 minutes, or 36 minutes.
Right.
So I think having him there to kind of relieve some of the ball handling pressure from Phil, he was an excellent free throw shooter down the stretch. He could still splash home threes at a decent percentage and was a good defender. So I don't know. I think, and he could play alongside Phil. They did that 2012 season. So I'll put him down as a possible for the last 3 bench spots.
And that's another what if. I mean, if Michael Dixon's playing on that 2013 squad, he just fills perfectly the role of, we almost flipped basically from 4 guards to almost the opposite, where we were almost kind of forward heavy, and we just needed a ball handler in that next season, and we probably would have been a lot better. So, definitely Mike Dixon is a guy worth considering for sure for those next 3 kind of bench spots. But I wanted to throw Jonte out there.
Absolutely.
I think that's obviously Jonte just offers incredible versatility and shooting and in a position of need on that particular squad. So
and we never saw peak Jonte. So the Jonte Porter that we're putting in this all-decade team potentially is freshman year Jonte that we actually saw play. I mean, we can't project out what he would have been, even though it probably would have been pretty spectacular.
Right, and because I still feel like what the Jonte that we saw at the very beginning of his sophomore season, and we saw him at the Midnight Madness event or whatever, he was a different player. Yeah. And I know that was just kind of a scrimmage and they were kind of screwing around, but you could tell that he had transformed his body. His athleticism was completely different. He had truly taken the next step, and you could tell.
And as weird as it sounds, he looked more confident.
He did.
Like, he just looked like he was owning the stage. He was going to be the man for Mizzou basketball that season.
Yeah.
Why do we end up talking about this?
I know. It's so sad. It seems like anything we ever talk about, it somehow leads to eternal sadness. But
spirals into the negative zone.
Exactly. But I think Jonte has to be there in one of those 3 spots.
Yeah.
So.
He showed that he could, protect the rim really well. Had some amazing blocks his freshman year to seal games for Missouri. You could play him at the 5 or the 4. I think he was actually most effective with Jeremiah Tillman on the floor his freshman year, and when he was slotted over at the 5, wasn't quite as effective. But just the way he's able to pass. I mean, just imagine him kicking it out or like the big to big play between him and Ratliff and him and Bowers.
Yeah.
And then also kicking it out for threes. It'd be incredible. Yeah,
his definitely his area of improvement was definitely his inside scoring. So I agree, he was definitely best suited at the 4, but incredibly versatile. It's not quite as obvious where to go from here. I definitely think that both Jordan Clarkson and Jabari Brown are in the running for me, and it's kind of weird because they both have they were individually incredible players, but the team just wasn't that great the year that they were both playing together. But obviously we've seen what Clarkson's done in the NBA. He was they were both so good at Mizzou, but I just can't really put my finger on what happened that year. I think they were definitely going through some off seasons or some off the court stuff.
Yeah.
But we could not win a game away from Mizzou Arena to save our lives that year. But I still think that both those guys, just as far as individual talent, have to at least be considered.
Absolutely. And they both had another year of eligibility remaining. So, I mean, for guys that, Jordan Clarkson, he was running the team his junior season. And even though he was kind of the go-to guy at Tulsa, that was a new experience for him. And he performed admirably just in that one season. So, classically another what if those two guys stick around for another season, maybe we see an elevated performance out of both of them and a completely different outcome for the season win total.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, definitely both of those guys are worth considering. Another guy that I think is worth considering is Jordan Barnett.
Mm-hmm.
His efficiency his senior season helped Missouri get to the NCAA tournament for the first time in a while. And I don't know, just if you go back and watch some of those highlights from that season, him and Cassius Robertson making 3-pointers, and also
they made a ton of threes.
Yeah, Barnett was a good wing defender. I just have specific memories of him cutting baseline and getting fed for a slam dunk, and it just looked so effortless. And it seemed like he was either getting a feed for a dunk, or getting a fast break dunk, or making a 3-pointer. That's like all of his points, and that's just, like I said, super efficient, and I think would help pretty much any squad you put him on. Senior year, Jordan Barnett.
I think those first three guys we mentioned are kind of in. Well, I guess there was 4 that we first mentioned there. At some point, I think there's kind of a tier. I think Barnett is close to that first tier, but I think for me, he's probably tier 2, maybe along with Cassius Robertson, both kind of being in that second tier. Those first,
we're about to have an interesting conversation.
Those first three or four names, I think are I don't know. It's tough to know what to do with Mike Dixon, honestly, just with kind of what happened with him.
Yeah.
But if we're talking about purely just on the court performance,
yeah, I mean, he was I don't think the NCAA has a 6th Man of the Year award, but he would have been the national 6th Man of the Year award winner that season. Probably some outlet does that and probably gave it to him. I don't know, but I mean, that's what he was.
Right.
And to me, talking about the tiers, I even just wrote it like this on my paper without even thinking about it. I have Dixon and Porter as sort of the tier 1 of the non-starters, and then Clarkson, Brown, and Barnett together in that second tier. I'm looking one last time over. I mean, if we're just some honorable mentions here real quick, we all know about the impact Cassius Robertson had in his one season at Mizzou. Even though we haven't seen that much out of Drew Smith, I mean, his efficiency and just his well-roundedness, throw him on any squad, and it's probably going to win a few extra games.
I'd throw Jordan Geist in there for sure.
Yeah, basically same concept with him. Alex Oriaki is a guy that I think before today, and we'll get to why he is not as forgotten as I thought he might be. He's kind of a guy that just kind of slips out the back of your mind, but transferred from UConn and was just an elite finisher at the rim and a really good rim defender as well. I don't know. Those are just some guys that are just worth mentioning because they're right on the cusp of being in that conversation.
Right. So do you feel comfortable putting in Mike Dixon and Jonte Porter for sure? So we're kind of just trying to figure out what to do with that last spot, that 8th spot.
I do.
Who's your next man up? So we've got a point guard and we've got like a power forward there, and
so I think we need a wing player. So I think that, Clarkson could play on the wing, but I think that kind of eliminates him. I think we would go with either Dixon or Clarkson as the 6th man.
That makes sense.
So I think I'm going to cross Clarkson off the list. That leaves us with Jabari Brown and Jordan Barnett. I personally would lean Barnett. I think the difference between him and Brown in my mind is I think Barnett is a little bit more versatile defensively. And when you're looking at a wing player that could guard the 2, 3, or 4, I think Barnett fits that role a little bit better than Jabari Brown. But I could definitely hear an argument for Jabari Brown for that last spot as well.
Yeah, I definitely won't disagree. I think if we're talking defensively, you got to go Barnett. Barnett, athletically, there are different players. Barnett's a little longer, kind of fits the 3 and D pretty well. I don't know. Jabari Brown, I think, may just be all around a little bit more offensively polished, probably a little bit better shooter. But
Jabari Brown was relied on more as a scorer his junior season, his last season at Missouri, than Jordan Barnett was.
Mm-hmm.
I pulled up KenPom, and Jabari Brown used almost 25% of possessions his junior season with an offensive rating of 119 and didn't turn the ball over, shot 80% from free throw, 51% from 2, and 41% from 3 on almost 200 attempts. Jordan Barnett used only 18% of possessions, an offensive rating of 120 compared to 119, 89% free throw, 51% from 2, 42% from 3, with 1 fewer 3-point attempt.
It's like almost identical numbers. Yeah. That's crazy. I really do think that either one of those guys, I mean, you're pretty happy with either one of those guys on your 8th spot of your team.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I mean, I'm fine penciling in Barnett there, but and I think that I think we think pretty nicely of Barnett. I think just because of that one season was pretty special with him and Cassius Robertson. Yeah, my memories of Mizzou basketball aren't quite as great when we think of that Clarkson, Jabari Brown era. Haith was kind of out the door after that season, and we just weren't very good. So yeah, I think I'm fine with putting Barnett in there for sure.
Yeah, I think when you look at the 2 seasons, I mean that's a good point. Barnett's senior year, Porter brothers, Conzo Martin, new era, make the NCAA tournament, and basically complete opposite. Haith out the door, like he said, but just that season, I think they started out in the top 25, were, I think, almost undefeated in non-conference. I think I'm thinking of the right season.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And then just...
in conference season, we're just incredibly average.
Yeah. I mean, 10 wins in a SEC that's very different from what it is today.
Yeah. In the non-conference, you're right. I forgot about that. They were very good and were ranked in the top 25 for a good portion of the non-conference.
And then lost in the first round of the SEC tournament, and I'm looking at the wrong squad here. I think they still did that, but so that was the year that they beat UCLA at home.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, everything was rolling, but then lost to Illinois by 1, and then was 9-9 in the SEC, and like I said, a much different SEC.
Mm-hmm.
Went to 2 overtimes with 110th ranked Texas A&M, then lost to Florida, and then ended up in the NIT. I think Bart Torvik, don't change a single thing. I think Bart Torvik actually has them in the NCAA tournament, but Bart Torvik seems to love Mizzou, and the selection committee hates Mizzou, if you just go by that website. And I remember the NIT that year just being like so ho-hum, okay.
I think they actually...
They played at home.
May have won their first game.
They did,
and then lost to like Southern Miss or something in the second round.
Yep.
Who did they beat in the first round?
Davidson.
Okay, I remember that now.
Yeah, but that was just such a disappointing end to the season, not making the NCAA tournament. So yeah, I can totally see what you're saying about those last seasons for those 2 guys, just painting a completely different picture.
Yeah.
Did we decide on Barnett? I don't want to pressure you into anything.
No. I think that your argument is valid. I definitely don't have anything against Barnett, that's for sure. Yeah. I think I just maybe think of Brown as a little bit more fluid athlete, maybe a little bit better shooter, but the numbers definitely don't necessarily support that. So, I'm good with Barnett.
Okay. Are we just like we're not just completely forgetting anybody?
I don't think so.
No. I would have liked to have seen
MPJ.
Absolutely. Gosh. I was about to say I would like to see Jeremiah Tillman be the type of player that would make the bench on this squad, but yeah, I would have taken Michael Porter Jr. as making. Yeah,
I'll cry myself to sleep tonight.
That just tells you I literally forgot about him.
We forgot about him on the $15 thing, kind of. I did.
I didn't quite forget about him on that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
We'll get to that.
We'll get to it. But okay, so here we have it. The Missouri Sports Podcast, Mizzou basketball all-decade team. Phil Pressey, Marcus Denman, Kim English, Lawrence Bowers, Ricardo Ratliff as your starting five. And off the bench we have Mike Dixon, Jonte Porter, and Jordan Barnett.
Pretty dang good team.
Yeah, well, that's Mizzou's first Final Four. And we're talking about all of these players in their prime. So we actually are talking about senior year Lawrence Bowers just being the perfect puzzle piece to fit in next to that 2012 squad. And then just pure versatility and offensive dynamite in the three bench players.
Mm-hmm.
I think that team gets Missouri its first Final Four.
I agree.
Oof. Man.
Who's the coach?
Who's the coach of the all-decade team? That's a great point. Man, you know what? I want to say Conzo Martin. I really want to say it, but he wasn't a big enough part of the decade.
Kim Anderson was a nice big piece of the decade, right smack in the middle.
Yeah, he was something. I guess you got to give it to Frank Haith.
I guess.
I mean,
he had by far the best season.
Yeah,
of any of those guys.
Oh yeah, by far, and a comparable second best season. Almost identical. I mean, they were a 9 seed, I think, both 8 or 9 the year they lost to Colorado State and Conzo's first year. I think you have to give it to Frank Haith.
I think so.
And we already talked about how he got the most out of some of Mike Anderson's leftovers. Best leftovers you could probably possibly imagine, but there wasn't much.
Yeah, what was Mike Anderson doing?
I don't know. That's so weird. You gotta think.
What was he doing?
I mean, I understand wanting to go back to that's your team where you play. You have so many memories there. You're an assistant.
But why then? Imagine watching Mizzou be one of the best teams in the country, like literally the year you leave. Like,
I don't know. That's a weird
bizarre
one. I mean, the timing was just not ideal. I can't imagine that was an easy decision for him. I mean, he had to have been thinking, why couldn't you have held on to whoever the coach was previously at Arkansas? Man, I wish you'd have just held on to him one more year so I could coach this team of seniors. Mm-hmm. And at least that's what I would be thinking, even if it was my dream job on the other end. Even if I knew I was leaving, I would at least think, man, you couldn't have waited 1 year? All right, Frank Haith, head coach. All right, now you ready to move on to what I think is maybe the most fun thing we've done since we created this podcast.
I think you might be right.
And I'll try to explain it the best I can here. Producer Cameron made an amazing graphic and helped this idea come to life. We sent it out. Kyle sent it out on the social medias, and it's a grid of Mizzou players sorted by positions in columns and dollar amounts in rows. If you have been alive in the last 5 years and consumed social media, you've seen a similar concept where you have $15 to create your dream lineup. People have done it with candy bars, movies, but most commonly it's sports teams to create your dream lineup. And obviously you have the constraint of only having $15 in your budget to spend, so you can't just go pick the entire 2012 roster because you'd be way over budget. But you could maybe just pick Phil Pressey and then, fill your lineup with other guys.
Or you could be like one of our Twitter followers who picked 15 Colin Van Leers.
That's a strategy. I mean, if you can get them all on the floor at the same time, then I think you got a pretty good strategy there.
Yeah, a really good basketball IQ team.
Yes, and they will always be in the right position.
Really good in practice.
Yes. We love Cullen. That's just friendly jokes.
Yep.
Where do you want to start with this? We sent it out onto the social medias, and you want to give maybe some of the lineups that people...
Yeah, I'll kind of maybe talk a little bit about some of the players that are picked the most, I guess. And I sent it out around 2 o'clock today. So that was probably like I don't know, 6 or 7 hours ago, and we got over like 50 responses. We had
Some of you couldn't follow the rules.
we had probably
that's
10 or
fine.
15 of you that tried to pick like multiple players in certain positions and stuff, so we didn't count those.
And we acknowledge the guards are definitely better, and we would probably rather have
Ideally, yes.
an extra person from the 1 or 2
Yes.
column.
Ideally, yes, we could move them around a little bit, but that's not the rules. So your vote did not count. But definitely by far and away the player that was picked the most was Alex Oriaki, just because the center position is pretty thin. Retrospectively, we had Tillman at the 4 line and at the $4 spot, and Oriaki at the 3. That probably should have been flipped. I think our thinking was maybe that Oriaki he played 1 season, maybe he was a little bit forgotten about, but he is not forgotten about. So yeah, Oriaki was picked a ton of times. Jonte was picked a lot of times. Marcus Denman picked a lot. Jordan Geist was picked quite a bit. So, however, there were 3 players out of these 15 guys who were not picked at all.
Okay.
Can you guess which 3 were not selected a single time?
Okay, let me pull up the graphic just so I can. And if you're just listening, then just head over to Mizzou, at Mizzou Sports Pod on Twitter or Instagram. You can look at this while you're listening. If you're watching on YouTube, we're going to try to have the graphic up there while we talk about it. So hopefully you're seeing this. And yeah, let's see here. I'm going to have to say that unfortunately, probably nobody picked Javon Pickett.
That's incorrect. Pickett was picked 5 times.
Wow. Okay. So I guess we're not taking seriously the person that picked Cullen Van Leer 15 times.
No, that's not counted.
Okay, let me try again. Probably nobody picked Ryan Rosberg.
He was picked twice. Ryan Rosberg had a pretty nice senior season.
I would agree, but replacement level of Reed Nico for $1 less. That was my thought process there.
Okay.
Sheesh. Okay. Probably nobody picked. Oh, I hadn't even considered this.
Okay.
Nobody picked Ricardo Ratliff.
That is correct.
Uh-huh.
Nobody picked Ricardo Ratliff.
That's very interesting because I think
it's just that Oriaki was such a great deal at $3 that just everybody went for that.
that's really great value, but I think Ricardo Ratliff is perfectly fine value at $5 there.
Oh yeah, you have to put him at 5.
His efficiency that year was off the charts
For sure.
And yeah, okay.
Is Oriaki doing that though with that team around him? Hashtag dunk everything.
Potentially, yes. That's a good point. But yeah, that's a good point.
So
Ricardo Ratliff just did something special though, where he actually didn't dunk it every time.
Yeah, he's very much under the rim player.
And he would just and
yeah,
the ball's in the basket.
Oh yeah, he was very quick.
That's how he did it.
Never
on YouTube.
He would never dribble. He would
Yeah.
just catch it and put it up immediately.
Yeah, incredible.
But you got one of the 3.
Okay.
Who are the other 2 that were not selected?
Okay, I guess nobody probably picked Torrance Watson.
One person.
Okay, I don't know what to do with these folks then. I don't know who they're not picking. You're just gonna have to tell me.
Well,
Yeah,
we'll think about it.
Positions.
We'll think about it. With Alex Oriaki, not joking, probably received 80 to 90% of the votes.
Nobody picked Tillman.
Nobody picked Tillman.
Nobody picked Ratliff or Tillman.
Yeah. I mean,
How interesting.
Again, you're getting such a great deal
Well,
at
yeah.
$3 with center.
That honestly, I don't know why I didn't think of that. That makes
Tillman.
much more sense than.
Like, where's the production done with Tillman?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
okay, so there's 2 of the 3.
Wow, 2 out of 1 position that didn't get selected.
Phil
That's
Pressey was only selected 1 time. Wow. The other person to not be selected, Mark Smith.
Okay. That's very interesting because I wrote out when I was trying to make my official $15 chart, I put down a possible lineup that included both Phil and Mark Smith. and I think it would have been a really, really good squad.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure it would be.
Now,
I think we'll get into this whenever we share our teams, but the value that you can get on the 1 and 2 line for some of the guards, like the point guards, are just. I mean, you almost can't not pick Jordan Geist or Xavier Pinson at the $1 and $2 line, in my opinion.
Wow.
If you really want to get value at the other positions, you just almost can't not select one of those two guys. But
all right, okay. No, it makes perfect sense. I don't know why I didn't think of Tillman, because I'm never. I fill out. If you make me fill out 100 different lineups, I'm never purchasing him at $4.
not a single one.
Flip the 2, and this was something that I considered when I kind of put out the bracket. And initially, I had Jordan Geist at $2 and Xavier Pinson at $1, and I just thought. And this is the same line of thinking that went into the placement of Tillman and Oriaki. I thought maybe just a little bit of recency bias would maybe give Pinson a little boost, and him being talked about as he entered his name in the draft. Maybe that would just kind of elevate him in some people's minds. But
you also got to think recency bias may not apply as much for a team that's been horrible for the last 2 years. So and people the nostalgia factor might have been a little bit big on Oriaki too.
And it doesn't matter how many people forgot about him. When you put his picture and his name there,
True.
They remember him.
It's there. Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, that makes perfect sense. And so I think, probably just from a raw production standpoint, Oriaki should have been at $4 and Tillman at $3.
Yeah, I think that it would have been interesting to flip those, because I just almost think that was a little too easy.
Mm-hmm.
You have to almost like pick Oriaki at $3. It's just too good of a deal.
Yeah,
and basically exactly like the data shows, you're never picking Tillman or Ratliff.
Right. I honestly thought Ratliff would get picked a little bit though. Okay. Anything else about the data that you want to?
That's it. I do want to share a few lineups that some of you guys shared. I picked a couple of them that were just like maybe a little bit different. We had some lineups that were pretty similar, but Andrew Kaminsky, he was the one person that picked Phil Pressey. So he picked Pressey, Denman, Van Leer, Kobe Brown, and Oriaki. So that was pretty dynamic duo of Pressey and Denman for sure.
Yeah.
Went a little weaker with at the 3 and 4 spots, but obviously you've got $15. You gotta do that somewhere.
Right. And I feel like Kobe Brown's not a terrible pickup at the 4.
No.
That was another weird one for me to try to place Kevin Puryear amongst basically Puryear, Mitchell Smith, and Kobe Brown. That was kind of a weird one for me to try to figure out, but I think it worked out. I don't think Kobe Brown. How many times was Kobe Brown picked?
Kobe Brown was picked 10 times versus Mitchell Smith and Puryear both were selected twice.
Yeah, well, that is some of the power of just being $1.
Exactly.
But yeah, Kobe Brown. That's not a bad one at all.
Mm-hmm. This one was from Burner Sports. That person selected Pinson, Denman, English, Mitchell Smith, and Reed Nico. I think that's a pretty good one. I like that.
Okay. What do you think the value is, or I guess I don't know what you want to call that if we're talking about like economic terms, the step up from Reed Nico to Ryan Rosberg? How interchangeable do you feel like those two are when you're talking about them in their prime?
In their prime. I think in their prime, Rosberg is a significant bump up to what Reed Nico was. But really only just in that very small window of time. I mean, we're talking 8 to 10 games where Rosberg was fantastic and legitimately a difference maker at the SEC level.
Yeah, like an all-conference type player.
Yeah, but so I don't know. It's tough to gauge because he really wasn't that player for very long. But again, if we're taking him at their prime, I mean, Reed Nico was he was pretty steady his senior year, but. Let me give you one player that I'm never picking for value reasons. And before you read your next one from Twitter, I'm never picking Kim English. Yeah, I probably am not either.
Jordan Barnett, and when I was trying to figure out, who should be what dollar amount, I was shocked when I compared English's numbers to Barnett's. Now we just talked about Jordan Barnett's senior year numbers on KenPom. If we look at Kim English now, used 18.9% of possessions, a 120 offensive rating, 72% from the free throw line, 59% from two, step up, 46% from three on about 25 fewer attempts. Both of them never turned the ball over and rebounded decently.
Yeah, I say the distribution of selections on the small forward position was definitely the most even. Barnett was picked the most, but Ernest Ross and Kim English were both picked the same amount, which was a little bit less than Barnett. So I agree with you, though. There's just too much value in Ernest Ross or Jordan Barnett to go up to the 5 on Kim English.
You do see a bit of a drop-off just looking at pure stats from Barnett to Ross, though.
Yeah,
as far as their efficiency.
Barnett's definitely can't go wrong. P. Stewart, he had Clarkson, Cassius Robertson, Ernest Ross, Kobe Brown, and Oriaki. And which is interesting because none of those 5 players were at the 5 line. But I still like the versatility. I like the balance. And he gave a little bit of reasoning for his pick. He said elite backcourt with Clarkson and Cassius. A little bit thin at the 4, but Ernest Ross was a really good rebounder. So, Ernest Ross at the 3 position could maybe help with rebounding and defense down low a little bit. So I thought that was pretty good rationale.
Okay, let me hit you with another player I'm never picking, and that's Cassius Robertson. And it's basically for the reason that we were talking about Jabari Brown in our all-decade team. The replacement level value in just his raw numbers, it's almost identical. So we already talked about Jabari Brown's numbers, but when you look at Robertson, he used 21% of possessions, 44% from 3 on about 40 more attempts. So obviously an excellent shooter. And I could see Robertson, because of his ability to handle the ball, a little bit more than Brown. But I think they're too similar statistically for me to spend the extra dollar on Robertson when Jabari Brown is cheaper.
I agree with you. And all the simulations I ran, I never really was interested in Cassius for that very reason. All right, and then the last one I had was from 573Ts, and they had Geist, Denman, Pickett, Jonte, and Oriaki. So, and that was a trend that I noticed when I was kind of compiling some of this, was for whatever reason, Geist and Denman were paired a lot, like a surprising amount. People had Geist and Denman. And I don't know if it was just kind of trying to find the balance between, the $1 and the $5, kind of trying to balance those costs out a little bit. But I think that would be a pretty good combination. That was definitely one that I kind of thought about in one of my simulations. I keep calling it that. But
Yeah. No, I love that. I mean, the point guard spot.
Yeah, you can't go wrong.
Yeah, I mean, you're incentivized to take Pinson or Geist just because it frees you up so much. I mean, Phil Pressey, I mean, I had him in one of my simulations, and I think he does make the whole team better. Right. But I think that's true of every single one of the guys in the point guard column. So, yeah, you really can't go wrong there. And I could fashion a team led by each one of these guys that I think I would put up against any other combination and say I would take my chance with the squad.
Yeah, and some of the reasoning that some people picked Pickett was for defense.
Oh, sure.
He's going to play hard. He's going to shut you down or certainly try his best to do so.
And you got to wonder with some of these guys. I mean, you look at Pickett and Van Leer are good examples of, you just wonder what they would look like if they weren't required to do as much. And we did see that with Van Leer. I guess it would have been his junior season. Yeah. When he he was just required to play good defense and, move the ball and shoot when you're open, basically. And he did just fine. So if he was good enough to be a starter for Conzo Martin his first season as head coach, then he's good enough to be picked up for $1 in this little game.
For sure. All right, so who's giving their 5 first?
Okay, so I've got 2 guys in my 5 that I settled on. I wrote out 3 different options for my
Of course,
5 and was able to eliminate one of them. And the one I chose, I've got 2 guys that you have not named in any of those starting 5s so far.
Okay. Well, first of all, you named before we started recording, you said there's one guy I'm never not having. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Is that Jonte?
It's not Jonte.
Ooh, wow. I thought for sure it was going to be Jonte.
I thought you would get there by the time I'm actually saying it.
Probably Barnett.
It's Barnett.
Okay.
Yeah. When I was looking at the numbers, I thought, man, I want this guy on every Mizzou team of all time because all he does is just score efficiently and he's versatile on defense.
Mm-hmm.
And he's athletic. I mean, he's fun to watch. Everything that you could want in a basketball player, in my opinion. So, yeah, Barnett was one that I was never not going to have. Jonte, not in my 5. Just so we don't confuse everybody and jump around a bunch, I'll just go ahead and give my 5. I've got Drew Smith, Jabari Brown, Jordan Barnett, Mitchell Smith. I got to stay on brand, and I like Mitchell Smith. And, of course, Alex Oriaki, the best value in the whole on the whole page.
Yeah, I wrote down 2 that I was kind of trying to decide between, and both of them had Jonte and Oriaki. But I think the one I'm going to pick was Jordan Geist. Just too good at the $1 line. I mean, just he was fantastic in his time at Mizzou. At least his senior year, kind of had his peak. He was fantastic. And then I had Jabari Brown, Jordan Barnett, and Jonte and Oriaki.
So your savings in the point guard spot allowed you to go up $2 and have Jonte.
Yeah, I thought that Jonte was just too good, too versatile to go for a lower value. At the other options at the $4, I like Kobe Brown at the $1. That's pretty good value, but just comparing Jonte to some of the other options below him, I couldn't not pick him.
Yeah, and comparing both of our teams, I think when we put out a poll, which squad you like best, I think yours will win. And if I saw them just in a blind test, I would probably click on yours too, just because the perceived difference between Drew Smith and Jordan Geist is just nowhere near the perceived difference between Jonte and Mitchell Smith. Mm-hmm. So
I understand your rationale for Drew Smith, though. I mean, I think I see your rationale that he makes everybody better, and Mitchell Smith he's great as kind of a team player. He's great defense. He can kind of help facilitate, and he can shoot from time to time. I understand the rationale.
And I think Mitchell Smith, his defense is what would be his biggest asset to this squad. We're talking about Drew Smith, Jabari Brown, Jordan Barnett, Mitchell Smith, Alex Oriaki. Brown and Barnett, they've got the shooting. I mean, you've got all the shooting you could ever want with those 2. Drew Smith can shoot okay as well. I would love to see what Drew can do when he has the types of weapons on the wing that are Jabari Brown and Jordan Barnett, and there's plenty of other guys on our thing here. I mean, if he had Cassius next to him, if he had Kim English, Marcus Denman, Jonte, I mean, any of those guys, it'd be so interesting to see. And obviously, we hope that's what we get out of Mark Smith next season, and it'd be even better if Torrance Watson was that. But seeing prime Drew Smith with those 2 guys on the wing would just be incredible. But, I think you've maybe found the perfect lineup, honestly. From what I already thought about Jabari Brown and Jordan Barnett, and obviously Oriaki's value, I think maybe you found the perfect lineup.
And that's really without thinking too hard about how they play together. That was more just me looking individually at every player and saying, okay, I think Geist is the best value at $1. I think Jabari Brown's the best value at whatever he was, $3. and just trying to make those best values fit the best I could. So I really didn't put much stock into how these guys interact with each other.
Well, whether you thought about it much or not, I think you still did a pretty good job in that regard. And I don't think, as long as you use all $15, I don't think you could craft a lineup that just wouldn't work.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I agree. Yeah. I even really think Van Leer, kind of the second one I wrote down here was Pinson, Denman, Van Leer, Jonte, and Oriaki. Because I just think Van Leer, he kind of got memed a little bit when at his time at Mizzou. I understand he was kind of supposed to be the shooter and everything and didn't shoot very well. But, in his prime, in that senior season that he ended up getting hurt, I think he really played an important role in the team, and just was so, he was just rock solid at his role on the team. And
that was his junior year.
Yeah, you're right. But I also really just wanted Pinson and Denman on the same team, so that was really why I picked Van Leer. Because I just think Pinson and Denman would be pretty lethal.
Yeah. Okay, so I just now realized that I said I narrowed it down to 3 options, and I eliminated one. The other one that I was choosing from was Geist, Brown, Barnett, Porter, Oriaki. So my second one that I almost picked was the one that you picked. Am I wrong? Geist, Brown, Barnett, Porter, Oriaki.
Yeah, that exact lineup.
It was a coin flip.
That's so funny.
That would have been funny if I'd picked it. But I think part of it was just wanting to stay on brand with Drew Smith and Mitchell Smith. Got to get the Smiths in there.
I almost didn't pick that lineup just because it didn't have any of the $5 players. It didn't have a single player from that kind of the dream team. But I just felt like I found good value at other places.
Well, those guys got enough love on this episode by being the predominant members of the all-decade team anyway. So
true.
Yeah, and I feel like in these sort of games, it's obviously you're dealing with real-world stuff and trying to fit it into these parameters. There's always going to be, incredible value one place and just stuff that makes no sense in others, unless it's just a pure opinion thing like cereals or something. Build your dream cereal lineup. I really like Kashi Go Lean, so if it was $1, I'm picking it every time.
That's your opinion, not mine.
Exactly. Exactly. I don't know. Anything? This was... I could seriously sit here and write out different... Just looking at the graphic. Beautiful graphic, by the way.
Great
Everybody needs to go look at it on
Great
Twitter and Instagram at Mizzou Sports Pod. I don't know. I could look at it literally all day and just keep writing down different options, different groups of 5.
I want some more good players to add to that in the next few years.
Absolutely. Yeah, hopefully.
And I want it to be more difficult.
It is interesting with this last Mizzou team. I mean, if Drew Smith plays 2 seasons, if Drew Smith exists instead of Jordan Clarkson, just swap them, then we're probably talking about Drew Smith as maybe making that bench spot on our all-decade team. And Jordan Clarkson, we're like, oh, we just, he's not on a great team. We haven't seen him that much. That's probably just the timing of that, where Drew Smith only had 1 year in the decade and it was on a 15-win team. Definitely doesn't help him at all.
I'm definitely tempted to throw this out again sometime and just do something even as simple as just switching Oriaki and Tillman and see what happens, because I think that just changes everything without getting such a surefire deal at the center position. And I also think it'd be interesting to, we didn't put Mike Dixon on this just because of how things kind of ended at his time at Mizzou.
Yes, I intentionally didn't put any players that were dismissed from the program or transferred away from the program.
Gotcha. And then, of course, we also did not include MPJ because that would have been kind of Pandora's box. But
yeah, I wouldn't even know. First of all, I wouldn't even know what column to put him in. I guess you'd put him at the 3.
I guess you would. And would he be the 5 just because he's the most talented player ever to come to Mizzou?
I have no clue. But we're talking about them. We're talking about each one of these players in their prime at Mizzou. So we're talking about...
He had a really nice putback at Mizzou.
Are we talking about Iowa State Michael Porter Jr.? Are we talking about Showdown for Relief Michael Porter Jr.? Are we talking about SEC tournament lose to Georgia?
Definitely not.
Michael Porter Jr.? So
yeah,
I think
That one's maybe a little too difficult, too
Yeah.
much gray area to include in something like this.
yeah, that's really weird. Because if you look at his actual stats,
We're talking about Denver Nuggets, like what he could have been, kind of like
yeah,
it's too much.
Yeah, it's insane. Yeah, we'll talk about what he could have been when we do our like 10-year Bart Torvik redo of reality. We may never do that, but I'll see if I can talk Kyle into it. I think that's all I got. That's really fun.
That was fun. Hopefully you're still listening. I'm sure that was pretty long-winded, but that was enjoyable. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that as well. But
We still will find your potential lineups entertaining. So
yeah,
if you missed that on
Yeah.
social media the
thanks
first
for
time
all
through,
the great feedback on Twitter for sure. We had a huge response. So that was awesome. All right. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. We're on Twitter at Mizzou Sports Pod and also Instagram at Mizzou Sports Pod. And we're on YouTube. And you can email us at MissouriSportsPod@gmail.com.
please rate us, subscribe us, rank us, leave a comment, leave a review, all those things. We would appreciate it. Leave a thumbs up, hit the bell icon, whatever all the other people say. Smash that like button.
There you go.
Don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for listening. We will see you next week.